Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannick, and you can support this podcast with a donation by going to our website, compassionate-living.org/donate. Today on the podcast, we have a lovely young woman joining us, Brialle Ringer. She is a yoga and meditation instructor, a breathwork guide, and she's going to be sharing how to support a more well-balanced life, bringing more well-being into your life. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. But first, I wanted to share some thoughts with you. A couple of episodes ago, we talked about the depiction of farmed animals in news media with Lisa Barca, one of the authors from my book, my new edited volume, The Humane Hoax. And I want to take a moment here and talk about animals in entertainment media. Because recently I watched a couple of TV shows that both had scenes of chicken exploitation. I was watching these two shows simultaneously, and within just a few days, I saw these two different depictions of chicken harm and suffering that were so nonchalant. It shocked me into remembering how far we have to go, really, and how people see farmed animals and especially chickens as these, I don't know, just kind of stupid automatons or not worthy of any consideration of life. One of the shows was Sweet Tooth. It's a Netflix original, and I actually loved the first season so much that I did a review on this podcast of the first season of Sweet Tooth a while back because I felt it was so pro animal. This show, so it's post-apocalyptic. It's after about 10 years after a virus has wiped out most of humanity. They call it the sick. And about the same time that the virus started, all the children born were being born as what they called hybrids. They were born half human, half animal. And the show's main character, Gus, is a young boy who is half boy and half deer. Well, the second season just came out recently and I was excited to watch it, but I was so disappointed. There were numerous episodes, numerous scenes in several of the episodes that were in a lab where they were trying to find the cure for this, the sick, the virus that wiped out most of humanity. And they had several chickens that were there in these barren cages, just these bleak, small metal cages, several chickens like in the background. And every scene, it was kind of like they were there a lot. And I couldn't even concentrate on the dialogue in these scenes. I was so distracted by the terrible images of these poor chickens. And I was so worried about these poor chickens. And it just seemed, so normal to everyone. And they just ignored these poor birds. It just seemed like it was, okay to have these chickens living in metal crates with nothing else in these boxes. And then at the end of the season, there was a scene where the doctor has killed them all, and you see them all dissected, cut up, their bodies cut open on the tables. I guess it could be argued that it was the bad guys, who had this lab, right? But still, I think that if they had had imagery like this of any other animal, certainly dogs or cats, I don't think they could have shot those scenes. I think it would have been too disturbing or unacceptable to have most any other animal confined in these barren, tiny cages, but somehow, because it was chickens, it was acceptable. So that was really, really disappointing from a show whose premise is to have sympathy for nature and animals. That's kind of the thesis of the show, of the story. But it's almost like chickens aren't part of nature anymore. Like they've somehow been removed from nature, removed from the animal kingdom, and have become something else, just a human tool for food, for experimentation in this case. it was just so troubling to me and really telling of how people perceive chickens. The other show is called The Power. It's an Amazon Prime show, and I was really excited to watch it because of the premise. The story goes that suddenly teenage girls have a new power. It's actually a new organ in their clavicle area, like in their collarbone area, that has appeared, and it gives them the power to use electricity through their bodies and through their hands, kind of like electric eels. And it's so powerful, this power, that they can actually hurt people with it and kill with it. So young women are suddenly able to defend themselves and fight back against abusers and oppressors. And of course, governments around the world are concerned and they're rounding up girls to suppress their power. A not so subtle metaphor there. But there's this one scene with one of the girls who is kind of like testing her power. And there's a chicken in a coop in a backyard that's being used for eggs. And she manipulates the chicken to make her walk and to make her fly. I mean, the poor chicken just kind of, tries to fly in this coop. But then she accidentally kills her. And it's kind of like she just is kind of like, whoops. I mean, she's kind of more concerned that she might get in trouble from the humans than with killing this poor bird. So casual and unconcerned that she ended the life of a sentient being. And my heart just stopped when I saw that chicken. I mean, they actually showed the chicken kind of freeze and topple over dead. And I started crying. I mean, I had to turn off the show. I was so traumatized by that scene, but it was just so casual and nothing to them. Another layer to all this is that, both these shows are very progressive in their subject matter and ideas. The Power, this show, The Power, is all about feminism and girl power. And there is a character in the show, an actor who plays a transgender nun, which is awesome. We've come so far in so many ways, but we still have a long way to go for the animals and for everyone. I mean, of course, representation doesn't necessarily translate into less oppression, as we're seeing in the trans community right now, as we see with racism, with so many other issues. But we have come really far in some ways in entertainment. 30 or 40 years ago, I don't think this show, The Power, with the characters that it has and the actors that it has, could have been made. And the feminists of that time, of 30, 40 years ago, they were rolling their eyes and screaming at the TV when they saw Brooke Shields naked at age 11 playing a child prostitute. And that was just fine with 1983, right? So we have, we've come along. That would be horribly unacceptable now, thankfully. And hopefully in 30 more years, we won't see the kind of exploitation of animals that we're seeing now. But we must continue to call out speciesism whenever we see it so we can continue to make that progress. All right, let's transition into our conversation with Brialle. If you are curious about what emotional alchemy breathwork is, then you're going to love this episode. Okay, here we go. Okay, so today we have Brialle Ringer joining us. She is a breathwork alchemist, vegan fairy goddess, and embodied leader coach on a mission to support changemakers lead with greater ease, joy, and passion, drawing on her degrees in social work, certifications in yoga, integrative energy healing, and plant-based nutrition. Brialle takes a trauma-informed, healing-centered, and holistic approach to her work. Welcome to the podcast, Brialle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, we like to start with a question about your vegan origin story. So, why and when did you go vegan?
Yes. So I initially went vegetarian when I was pretty young, around the age of 10. And my parents say that I was inspired by episode of this TV show The Simpsons, where Lisa Simpson was kind of like having her awakening to understanding like animals are sentient beings.
Really?
And yes.
Oh my gosh, that got someone to go vegan. I love it.
Yes, it played a huge role in my journey. And so
Wow.
was an only child and I always had close relationships and kinship with animals. And so when I made that connection, it was like so obvious for me, like, oh, I also don't want to eat animals. Animals are my friends. And thankfully, I had a supportive mom.
Yeah.
And so I kind of stayed in that vegetarian space for a number of years until I kind of got to college and started to learn more. And it was really the documentary What the Health and Cowspiracy. I kind of watched those like back to back. And that is what helped me to really make the connection that, like, okay, if I really care about animals, if I really care about my health, if I really care about the environment, then it's time for me to take that next step.
Wow, I love that it was the Lisa Simpson episode. That just makes me so happy because you see these things where we're always so starved for vegan representation in media, and that was one of the really big, fantastic ones. And I love that. I love that as a kid you saw that, and that started your journey. That's great.
I know. I'm so grateful for that representation and role model that I had that kind of sparked that thinking for me.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, so the reason I invited you on is the wonderful work that you are doing around wellness and healing and the mind body connection for activists, for vegans. So tell us a little about what you do. What is this work all about, and what got you started kind of down this path?
Yeah, so, I think that that connects a little back to the first question that I'll expand a little bit to, that leads me into more of my involvement in the vegan movement. So,
Hmm.
I had been vegan now for the last 5, going on 6 years, and was vegan for a while, kind of just doing my own thing on my vegan journey. But my grandfather passed away back in 2019 after a heart attack and dealing with type 2 diabetes for a number of years. And when he passed away, I really had this awakening of just realizing that I knew too much about health to not be sharing more with my family, with my community, with other people in the world. And in that moment, I really declared that the cycle of illness and death from preventable disease in my lineage ends with me. I
Mm.
was really clear that, the research shows that literally in as little as 2 weeks that a plant-based diet can start to reverse the impacts of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And so that was a big awakening for me to get more involved. And so that's when I got my certification in plant-based nutrition, and I had already had my yoga teacher training, and so I kind of started to piece things together and create holistic health and healing programs that supported people going vegan and healing holistically. Along that journey, at first I was just kind of doing things in my own little silo. I wasn't super connected to the movement until I met my partner, who's been a vegan activist for 18 years, deeply involved in the movement. And
Wow.
he kind of helped to usher me in and get more connected. And one of the ways that happened was through the People's Fund, that was offering some funds for Black activists through the People's Fund. And in doing so, I created this program, the Black Women's Healing Haven, to help people go vegan and heal holistically, and started to just do things on a bigger level of really sharing about plant-based nutrition and holistic health and wellness. We had 600 participants from like 14 different countries, using the power of social media to really reach people and share that message.
Wow.
So that is how I got more connected to the vegan movement, because when I was in the People's Fund, I like met Christopher Soul Eubanks, and
Yes.
we were both living in Atlanta. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's other people who are doing this like right in my backyard, and got connected to all these other activists and really started to feel connected, started to meet people who I could collaborate with, and started to build a community and get more involved. And then getting a better understanding of the needs of the movement. And
Mm.
so that brings us back to this question of, what I do and how I got here. My background is actually in social work. So I got my degree in social work, and when I was in undergrad, I was doing the absolute most. I was doing undergraduate research on college homelessness,
Mm.
working at a shelter for youth experiencing homelessness. I was a McNair scholar and traveling, presenting my research. I had an internship. I was working to put myself through school, and I would have these long 12-hour days because I just really didn't know how to say no. I cared so much about all the different issues, and particularly around homelessness and food justice and housing justice. Any opportunity that came to be engaged in that, I wanted to be involved. But as I kept doing that, I got so burnt out. And it came to the point that I was at the end of one of those 12-hour days, and I was driving home. And as I was driving out of the parking lot, I drove straight into a pole.
Mm.
And that was just how deeply disconnected I was, that
Mm.
I literally couldn't even see what was right in front of me.
Wow.
And the moment that the airbags went off, my first thought was, I don't have time for this.
Oh no.
I'm supposed to be doing grad school applications.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that's awful.
And so when I got home and like the dust kind of settled, I realized what an unhealthy relationship I had to service, what an unhealthy
Mm.
relationship I had to higher education. And I knew that I could not continue at the pace that I was moving. I could not continue on to graduate school because my health and well-being was being impacted. And if I really care for these causes, if I really care about supporting collective liberation, then I need to start caring more about my own health and well-being.
Yeah.
And so that led me to kind of take a moment, to really a year or so, to just pause and step back from everything and start to really just prioritize my own well-being. I started getting more into yoga. I was meditating between my classes. I took up hula hoop dancing. And
Mm.
as I was engaging in self-care and these different practices, I really started to come home to myself and feel so much better. And I was also sharing the journey along the way online, on social media, and like people were really resonating with what I was sharing. And I was like, there's something here. Like I'm feeling really good. People are really resonating with it. Maybe this is something that I can do to support other people and support collective liberation in a way that is actually sustainable and feels good in my body and my spirit.
Yeah.
And so I started to follow that path. That first off, I like traveled in a van for a year, landed in LA, connected with a really great mentor. That's when I got my yoga teacher training. And as I had shared, shortly after, got plant-based nutrition certification. Shortly after, breathwork and integrative energy healing training, and now piecing all of those things together. And when I got more involved in the vegan movement through the Black Women's Healing Haven and running that program and getting connected and seeing more, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing the same things that I saw when I was in social work. I'm seeing the same pattern and challenges that I was having back when I was getting my degree and back when I was contributing and working around housing justice. That burnt out, exhausted energy
Yeah.
of pushing from a place of overwhelm, pushing from a place that's like absolutely not sustainable. And I was seeing a lot of that happening within the vegan movement. And so I was like, oh, okay, I think that this is where my work is now, is
Mm.
to share this wisdom and medicine around embodiment, and just to let people know, like, I know that it can feel so hard to step away because you really care.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're scared that if you slow down and do less, that the causes that you care about will suffer, that the animals will
right,
suffer if you
right.
do less or if you take a break. But it's totally unsustainable, and that you can do really meaningful work without abandoning yourself. And so I want to be here to be the example and to show people the way to that.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, and I've been doing this work for 30 years and I've seen it again and again and again where vegans, animal advocates, we have what's often called compassion fatigue, with depression or anxiety, just from the knowledge of all the suffering and having to be in it every day. And I like I said, I've been doing this work for over 30 years, and I now have come to a place where I'm definitely more sensitive to it now. I used to be able to compartmentalize so easily, and now that's much harder, as time passes. I don't know if there's like an accumulative effect. I've just seen so much, but it's our work, and it's so we have to kind of be in it all day and watch videos and learn about it so that we can write about it and educate about it. So it's, it can be very, very intense. And so, what do you do? What do you advise people that are feeling that overwhelm and stress and depression because of the state of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there around like it being accumulative is so true. And when we are witnessing, sometimes secondhand and other times firsthand, the
Yeah.
trauma that animals are experiencing, that's traumatic for us also. And so that stress and trauma gets held in our bodies. It's where it all gets held into. The issues are in the tissues. And so when
Mm.
I speak about embodiment, embodiment is really using the body to help move through the stress and trauma that's held there. Somatic healing, to use the body to really expand your capacity to feel and be in touch with how you feel. Because I think the problem is not necessarily the grief, the sadness, but oftentimes when we avoid it, deny it, repress it, minimize it, make yourself wrong for feeling that way. And so, what can create a lot of release and being able to transmute it and use that anger, that grief to like fuel the work in a way that like propels you from a place of passion rather than like feeling absolutely overwhelmed and weighed down, is actually being able to feel it. And so, not sometimes we bypass our emotions by thinking and like getting stuck in our minds, by trying to problem solve, by like immediately jumping into, I have to do something about this, I got to get in action. And that is important. And it's also important for us to feel the weight of the grief and sadness of the state of our world and the state of what we're advocating for animals, and the conditions that they're existing in and suffering in. And so when I say feel it, I mean like let the tears come.
Mm.
Like give yourself the space to really weep and feel that, rather than trying to just keep pushing and doing more and trying to fix it and solve it. Like have a space where you can kind of drop in and let it go, and let the tears come and let the anger come in your screams and your grunts and your groans. And I facilitate what I call emotional alchemy breath work as a really powerful space for doing this, where you have a container of like an hour to just like have your eyes closed and be with yourself and be with how you feel and feel what's ready to be felt, that you maybe previously rushed by because it felt like you just didn't have the time to deal with it because you were scared that like, oh, if I really let myself feel this, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like get back up and continue on the next day.
Yeah.
But it's like the more that we resist it, the more that it persists. And so we want to have spaces where you can just dip your toe in. And in trauma informed spaces and nervous system regulation, this is called titration. And it's just that dipping your toe in. And you don't have to like sit in a space of letting it just totally take over. But if you have 5 minutes to let yourself sit and feel, if you have 10 minutes, if you have an hour, if you have a therapy session, a support group, I mean, community is huge here. And it's really about having consistent practices to support you, daily practices that support your holistic health and well-being, and showing up to those with devotion, as devoted as you are for animals, being as deeply devoted to your own well-being. Because I don't want people to wait until the storm comes, because when you wait until the storm comes, like, you just get swept up in it a lot easier. But if you every day you touch in and you connect to your breath, your body, and the earth, those are kind of the pillars that I recommend for people, is connect to breath, body, and the earth on a daily basis. You start to create this strong, solid foundation with deep roots, where when the wind comes, you might get your leaves, you might blow in the wind a little bit, you might get a little rustled, but you have this strong, sturdy foundation to come back to because you're consistently showing up for yourself. And so whatever that looks like for you, and this is where it really gets to, you get to play and have fun with it and welcome the things that bring you joy and welcome the things that bring you peace, whether that's going for hikes or being on the water or meditating or dancing or yoga. Whatever that looks like for you, those practices that bring you joy, that connect you to yourself, that bring you that sense of feeling rested and at peace, do that regularly and really make time for it. And then lastly, I would say learning what a sustainable pace is for you will be also really important. And this takes some practice, but really just know that it is okay to slow down. It's okay to take a break. And this work and this movement will be here when you return. And if it's a fear of the work falling behind, then you find people who can hold the work with you, to find people who you can share it with, and being able to have that community of support, to have people who you can delegate things out to and ask for and lean on when you need to step back so that someone else can step up and take that place.
Wow, all really, really good thoughts and advice. Just really powerful work. It's so important. I feel like anyone that does this work, especially for a period of time, should probably be in therapy or some kind of therapy. But it's hard to afford that. I know that there's numerous times that I have wanted to do therapy, but it costs a lot of money. And a lot of us that are doing this work don't have health insurance and can't afford therapy. So these kinds of practices, these things that you're talking about are so important, so critical. I know that you're going to actually be guiding the morning wellness program at the Animals and Vegan Advocacy Summit. And that is a conference, an animal advocacy, animal protection conference that's happening in LA. It's July 27th to 30th. Tell us about what you plan to offer there. You're going to be doing a program like every morning of the conference, right?
I am. So I am going to be facilitating some morning movement and embodiment practices that are really going to support people getting out of the mind and into the body. Being at conferences, it can be a lot of rush, a lot of information overwhelm. And
Yeah.
so having a moment to really drop in and again connect to breath, body, and the earth to support folks flowing through the rest of the summit with greater ease, presence, and connection. And so, what people can expect from those morning practices is a combination of light stretches, like very gentle kind of yin style yoga, breath work, somatic practices that really help to regulate the nervous system and leave you really deeply connected to your body. And so it's very beginner friendly. All levels will be welcome. And I'm just really excited to create this space for people to drop in. And the breath work I facilitate is a 3-part breath that's into the belly, into the heart, and then out. And so people will get to have a taste of that. And like you were saying around the aspect of cost being a barrier to people experiencing therapy, what I really love about the breath work is once you know the pattern, then you can drop in from wherever. It's very accessible to anyone once you know the pattern. I always share my playlist with people. It's like, all right, you have the playlist, you have the breathing pattern. Now it's just a matter of creating the space for you to continue it. And so it'll be a beautiful container for people to drop into during the summit, but I also really am holding the intention of empowering people with practices that they can use on an ongoing basis to support them showing up in their sacred service to animals in a way that's really sustainable.
Nice. And so if someone's not going to be coming to the summit, how else can they experience what you have to offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a membership called Devotion, and Devotion is a space for people to connect with and embody their highest selves and highest service. And in that, we practice breath work on a monthly basis, an embodied healing session that I facilitate on the first Sunday of the month. And then we also have group coaching once a month, where it's really an opportunity to share insights that came up in that embodied healing and breathwork session, because a lot can come up when you
Mm.
sit and are like fully with yourself to feel and to connect to your own inner wisdom. And so the group coaching really helps to, share that with others and then to get support thinking through what are the next steps for taking aligned action to support yourself and your community. And so they also get access to my full library of yoga, breath work, meditation recordings, plant-based nutrition support. I also have some free things available on YouTube. I have like a 15-minute guided grounding practice. That's a really great kind of daily practice and check in to connect with how you feel and your body and your energetic levels. And it's just a good way to practice self-awareness, body-mind connection, emotional regulation. So that's totally free. It's on YouTube if you want to just like get a taste of it and have something available. I also often do free workshops. I have one coming up and typically offer a free workshop on a monthly or quarterly basis, again, just to make the work accessible and
And
give
are
people.
those online or
Yes, those
yeah,
are
online?
online.
Okay.
Yep, online workshops. And the
Mhm.
best way to stay notified about those is to be on my email list. And if you go to my website at bewellwithbrielle.com, you can join my email list to be notified about all of those opportunities. So those are kind of like the free and low cost offers. And then for people who desire more support, more ongoing, long-term, deeper, more intimate programs, I also offer private coaching on a 4 to 6 month basis, really walking the walk with people to help them to unlearn some of those harmful narratives we've embodied around grind culture and pushing ourselves beyond our limits
Yeah.
to create a more healthy, sustainable work and life that really lights them up and feels like a beautiful, authentic expression of using their gifts to support the causes that matter to them. I work with organizations. I love working with nonprofits. I work with a number of nonprofits in the vegan movement and then outside of the movement also, where I come in and I support their staff with emotional well-being support, with breath work. I teach workshops around somatic healing and the importance of having space to understand how our bodies are holding on to the stress and trauma that accumulates in this work and how to move through it so that it doesn't weigh you down. So I do sessions with nonprofits that want to work with me, usually on an ongoing basis to have support for their staff. And that's really satisfying and fulfilling to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I also lead retreats, which is one of my greatest joys
Okay.
because I get to do all of the things in like one potent container where we are in a beautiful place connected to nature. We have amazing vegan food. I usually bring on a chef to create amazing, delicious, whole food, plant-based meals. We're doing daily yoga and breath work and
Yeah, and your retreats are usually in Mexico, right?
so yeah, there's a place in Mexico that I really love on the coast of Oaxaca, Mexico. Right outside of Puerto Escondido is where I did one last year, and I have another one coming up in January, Wild and Free. This one is really, there's a number of different communities that I support. Sometimes I focus in on women of color change makers. The one for Wild and Free is empowered healers, mystics, creatives, and visionaries. And I'm leading it with my friend who is a fellow queer earth angel. And so we're really calling in folks who are queer and want a safe container to, expand to even greater levels of liberation and authenticity. But essentially, I host retreats twice a year. And I also host private retreats for people who just want the focus and attention totally on themselves. And it can be just a really potent container to kind of kickstart their journey or dive a little bit deeper, mastermind their next passion project and how they want to show up. Really develop again those healthy habits of devotion to their own well-being that they can continue like way long beyond our time together in a retreat or coaching container or whatever that looks like. Those are kind of all of the different offerings that are available now. And I
Wow.
have a group program coming up in the fall called Sustainable Sacred Service that I'm super excited about also.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like in the last year, have just gotten so clear about who I'm here to serve and how, and the momentum has just really been building in a way that is super exciting. And I know it sounds like a lot, and there is, but it also is so deeply aligned with my spirit. And I also still take so much time to just play and dance and like have long leisurely mornings. So it's amazing what happens when you get super clear and like drop deep into the most authentic expression of who you are and find the practices that help you to be well and whole and worthy and deeply connected to that divine remembering. The way that I show up in service is just so remarkably different than that Brielle who was burnt out in college. And it feels exciting, it feels playful, it feels fun, it feels sustainable. And, that's really what it's all about for me.
Mm. Well, I have a big smile on my face. Your energy is contagious. I'm definitely feeling that vegan fairy goddess that you have in your bio. I love that so much.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, how wonderful. I'm so glad that you have tapped into all this. It's incredible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you about something that is a little bit of a different direction, but certainly related. You do, and you mentioned it, I think, before. You do some work with Apex Advocacy, which is a fantastic organization. Christopher Soul Eubanks is the founder, and he's actually one of the authors in my newly released edited volume, The Humane Hoax. And so Apex does anti-oppression work. Can you talk about maybe the work that you do with Apex and also more broadly about the challenges and opportunities for Black people and Black women in particular and veganism and going vegan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, over at Apex, I am the director of the Global Majority Caucus, and that position started out at Encompass. And then, when Encompass dissolved, the Global Majority Caucus was kind of the remaining program that then just found a new home and perfectly found its new home at Apex Advocacy because Sol and I already had a really great friendship and relationship. And so the transition was just seamless and such a perfect fit for Apex and their mission. And so at the Global Majority Caucus, it is really a space for people of color in the movement, Black, Indigenous folks of color who are engaged in animal advocacy and veganism and want a space to connect. I think that when we talked about that compassion fatigue and burnout and turnover in our movement, one of the things that I spoke about that's really important is having community, having a space where you can go where you feel heard and seen. And so the Global Majority Caucus is that space for folks of color in our movement who sometimes have just had a hard time finding a place where they feel that sense of belonging, where they feel like their voice is represented in what a movement that can sometimes feel very predominantly white and at different organizations not always felt heard or seen. And so when they come to this place and we have these monthly virtual community check-ins and you just like are on this Zoom call with all these other beautiful Black and brown faces who are doing amazing work, and it just is this beautiful virtual hug where people are like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
I didn't even realize how much I needed this space
Mm.
to share just whatever is present in their lives, their challenges, their celebrations. It's a beautiful network of support where people will be like, hey, this opportunity is happening. Hey, here's this grant opportunity. Hey, here's this job opportunity. Hey, I have a question about this. And people will jump right in to be like, let's hop on a call. Oh, here's this other person or resource you should be connected to. And so it's that community of connection and belonging that really supports people being able to continue in this movement and in this work.
That's wonderful. So needed, such good work. I'm so grateful that as a movement, we have been recognizing, that this work needs to be done, that we need to reach out further and to other communities to expand our diversity. And also, it shouldn't just be surface level or just saying we're going to do it. We need to find ways to support and follow through and give the space for those communities to be able to thrive and support one another. So important, really incredible work.
Yeah, thank you. It really does feel so special to witness the community that's being built there. And it's a global community. We have, 75% is based here in the US, and we have folks in other countries like India and Mexico and the UK and all over the place. And there's about 250 members at this point and growing. And so we have the space for people to connect with one another, but then we also offer trainings. Like I facilitated and organized a fundraising made easy training series in partnership with 50 by 40. And that was really amazing to just share with people. Funding is a big thing that people don't always feel supported in or
Yeah.
knowledgeable about how to
Yeah.
navigate. And so we created a fundraising training series to help people to better learn how to get support for the amazing work that they're doing. We have a donor connection day coming up in the fall where folks will be able to share about their work and potentially connect to donors and receive funding. And when it was facilitated back in 2021 at Encompass, over $80,000 in funding was distributed to 7 individuals. All people who participated were funded. And so beyond just being a beautiful place of belonging and community support, we're also really helping to create important resources that support people in the work that they're doing.
Good. Good. And also the term global majority, we've talked about this on this podcast before, but just, if someone is new to the podcast, I'd love to kind of just point out that term. This is a new term that hopefully we'll be hearing more of. Would you like to just briefly touch on that term, the people of the global majority?
Yeah, absolutely. So the term people of the global majority is really this empowering shift to identify ourselves outside of the lens of whiteness, where oftentimes when people talk about people of color, we're talked about as the minority. But if we zoom out and look globally, folks who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, Latinx, we are the global majority.
Yeah.
And so it's this way for us to reframe the way that we view ourselves in relation to others, and just gives you this greater sense of empowerment that we aren't the minority, we're the majority here. And so it's really just a shift towards empowering language.
So, Brielle, I am curious about your spiritual background because the work you do, of course, has a spiritual energy and feeling to it. Were you raised in a religious household? What's your connection with spirituality and this work?
Yeah, so I was not raised in a religious household. In fact, my great grandma jokes and laughs with me because whenever she would bring me to church, even as a little girl and up through like high school, occasionally I'd like tag along to my family going to church, say my grandma or my cousins, and I would always fall asleep. It was like my brain was like, no, do not receive this program. This is not the path for you. But I did have a mom who was very like non-traditional. There were periods of me being homeschooled. She really also loved animals, was connected to nature. And so she never had any like specifically, you know what? Yeah, she was spiritual. She was spiritual because I remember being like 12 years old and falling off my bike and my mom like teaching me how to do energy healing on myself to help ease my pain.
Wow. Okay.
Working with crystals, and we traveled a lot, and so there was definitely a spiritual connection. And like when I first started learning about, say, manifestation and co-creating my experience, that was when I was really young, like 12 or so years old, and
Mm.
doing that with my mom. And so I grew up with my mom having that influence, that like free spirited spiritual influence on me that then I, disconnected from and kind of assimilated into normal culture as I was in middle and high school. But then when I started this path of leaning into my own healing when I was burnt out and coming back to some of these practices and deepening into them and finding them in my own way, it was deeply spiritual. It's very deeply spiritual. And for me, my spirituality is this connection to my ancestors and this deep remembering of the resilience of my ancestors, of all of the thousands of people of my bloodline who walked before me, and I am because they were.
Mm.
That makes me feel so divinely supported always, always. Feeling my feet connected to the earth and like the soil, the soles of my feet kissing the soil, and feeling deeply held by the earth that supports me in every step I take, that is deeply spiritual for me. And then when I sit and I do breath work or yoga or meditation and I connect to my own spirit, and I have these moments of feeling so much bigger than my body, so much bigger than the circumstances that are right in front of me. And I just have this deep knowing that I am co-creating my experience and that there is a God that is within me. And I'm helping to shape my experience and the experience of others. And it's this like beautiful dance that we're doing. And so it was never something that was like specifically taught to me. It was more that like the deeper I went into myself, of like moments of deep gratitude and silence and sitting with my own spirit and being with the earth, and also working with plant medicine, having these moments in ceremony and ritual where I've experienced some magic that is like beyond being able to be understood by our knowing mind and our cognitive rational mind, and just like, oh, there's something much bigger than me that's happening here, and what a gift that I get to play a part in witnessing it and co-creating and shaping it. And so that is my spirituality.
Wow. Wow, amazing. Well, you seem so wise beyond your years, Brielle. Uh, you really do. I hear your beautiful energy and your incredible work. I really, honestly, now after speaking to you for an hour or so, I feel so at peace in a way. Your energy is just lovely. And I'm so grateful that you have found this work and that you're doing this work because we need it as a movement, as a people, as, a society. We need this work so badly. I think, we are so disconnected from nature, so disconnected from each other, and so disconnected from what needs to be done, which to me, I feel is a reconnection to compassion. To me, spirituality is compassion. It's all about compassion. Ahimsa is what I really embrace with spirituality and nonviolence. And I feel it just radiating from your work, from your energy, from the work you do. It's about compassion for ourselves, starting with ourselves, and then having compassion for the world, for the animals. And yeah, it's just really, really beautiful. Thank you for all that.
Thank you for beautifully reflecting it back to me.
Well, Brielle, we need to wrap up. So I'll ask you our last question. What gives you hope for the future?
What gives me hope for the future is remembering the resilience of my ancestors, and being a Black woman, knowing that my ancestors endured the transatlantic slave trade for me to be right here, right now, experiencing so much joy and magic. And I will get to pave that way for future generations as well. And so that deep remembering of that resilience and that gives me hope. And then also when I see and get to witness the peace and ease and freedom that people experience when they drop into the wisdom within and access a deeper knowing that is much bigger than us, like literally seeing their face, energy, presence like totally shift in a matter of an hour of doing embodiment practice with me, a breathwork alchemy session, seeing the transformation that they experience and noticing just how true it sounds and feels for them when they say, I feel free. I'm like, yes,
Hmm.
this is the taste of liberation that you're fighting for. Like it lives within you. The sanctuary that you seek is within, and it is always available to you, no matter the conditions of the outside world, no matter what's going on around you. There is a place of peace that lives inside of you. Go there often. That gives me hope.
Ah, wow. Incredible. Well, Brielle, thank you so much for your time. I am looking forward to meeting you at the Animals and Vegan Advocacy Summit in July. And thank you so much for all that you're doing. It's incredible.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It's been an absolute joy, pleasure, and honor to be here and having this important conversation with you.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. You can meet Brielle and experience her wellness workshops at the Animals and Vegan Advocacy Summit in LA from July 27th to 30th. I will also be there at the event with a table for compassionate living. I'll be selling my new book. So if you're going, please stop by our table and let me know that you listen to the podcast. We will have some new stickers of our new podcast logo there. So come on by and say hello. If you can't make the event, I have a link to Brielle's website in the show notes so you can learn all about what she has to offer. And I want to say here as well that if you are really suffering emotionally with trauma, anxiety, depression, please seek medical attention from a certified psychologist, either online or in your area. Take care of yourself and seek medical care. If you appreciate this podcast and want to see it continue, the best support that you can give us is to become a monthly donor to Compassionate Living. We don't do Patreon or any of that. We are a nonprofit. So your donation to Compassionate Living is critical to helping us keep these podcasts going. And a monthly donation in any amount that's comfortable for you is so helpful. You can also, of course, give just a one-time donation as well by going to compassionate-living.org/donate. I hope you're having a magical summer. Get out, play, enjoy nature, enjoy the warmth, and live vegan.